was born in 1939, and I was 5 months old when the war started. And when the war ended, I was 6 years old. So anyway, let me start off. And I was born in Hanau, Germany. And what I remember from that time was basically when the bombing started getting heavier, and we had to go to the basement, and we had everything set up in the basement. The beds were in the basement, and we were sleeping in the basement, actually, because that was a safer place. And when the alarm came on, the sirens went off when the bombs are falling. We could hear them falling and hear the explosions. But at that time, we were supposed to get under the bed because things may fall off the ceiling and so forth. But anyway, that is one of the experiences I had. And when the bombing got heavier, I guess my mother decided then that we move out into the country. And that was in 1944. And that was quite an adventure as such, because my mother had arranged to go with a bicycle, and she had a trailer for the bicycle, a two-wheeled trailer, where we were going by train to a little village called Hetzbach, and from there we went to Hammelbach, and from Hetzbach to Hammelbach, that is where my mother was on the bicycle, and my brother and I were in the trailer in this little car, plus a lot of other stuff that she was saving from the house. Anyway, that was quite an experience, and I guess my mother was telling me afterwards, we kids are in the back and we say faster, faster, and, making a little fun out of it. So that is the first part. In Hammelbach, there were other people that we were living on very close quarters with many other families together in one room. And it was, I guess, later that year that we moved from Hammelbach then to Untermossau, where we stayed with a farmer's family. And at that time, that was towards in November 1944 is when we went there. And there, it was, that's when I was starting school there. And the school was like 5 grades in one classroom and one teacher only. So I had my first experience of school there. And then I also do remember, because there were planes flying overhead a number of times, and one time there was a farmhouse close by. And apparently there was a German army truck there, and they were shooting at it, and the farmhouse caught fire. And what I remember then was all the people from the village having a chain down to the little creek, a little river there. It's just a sort of little river, a little creek. And with buckets, they were handing the buckets of water up to the farmhouse there and trying to put out the fire. So that was quite an experience. And then there was the end of the war then. There was the Americans were coming through. And we're standing, we kids outside the farmhouse there. And that's the first time I saw Negroes, or what you call today people of color. Anyway, that was, I've never seen one before. So that was a, interesting thing. Well, one other little episode there was death penalty for people who did not turn in their weapons. And
the Americans, so you understand, it wasn't the Germans, it was the Americans, after the American people.
It was the Americans that put out that thing about not, you have to turn in your weapons, and if you don't, then it's death penalty. And my mother had a little revolver, a little gun. I think it was a Luger, and she had it in the desk drawer in the bedroom. And the Americans came through and inspected the houses and so forth, and they also opened that drawer, and apparently, and this is what my mother was telling me later, that he probably saw the gun in there, but he didn't want to, take any action, and just closed the drawer again and left. So anyway, that was apparently my mother was very upset about it, or scared about this.
Mm-hmm.
No, what else? Oh yeah, now the end of the war. Now I was in. The end of the war was in May '45, right? And in Europe, and in September, I guess it was in Japan. And in 1946, my mother had arranged by train. We went to Austria, and basically we went on a cargo train, like a cattle car, not a passenger train. And she had arranged all the furniture, and the farmers, they gave us some eggs and so forth. And she also had a little stove put in there. And but the requirement was that they could not take any children. So, and my mother forged the papers and said +2 children. So anyways, that was a train experience going to Austria. And I don't know how long it took, but I think it took quite a number of days. And my mother was cooking on the train, and so it was quite an enjoyable ride as such. And on the border to Austria, and somehow, I don't know what the arrangement was or how it happened, my father came on the train.
She went and found him at your grandmother's house.
And my grandmother, who lived in Austria, in Linz, she apparently, that's where my father went to. And they found each other, and he was on the train then. And there was another very interesting story. As the train is moving around, when they bump it and they move it from one track to another and so forth. My father was looking out, the doorway, which was open, and say, watch out, we're going to get hit, we're going to have a big bump. And the door slit closed and hit his head. So that was another experience. He had a bleeding head then, but nothing serious as such. But anyway, it was another interesting story. From Graz, we went to Hartberg. This is where my mother's parents lived. My grandparents from mother's side, and that's where we stayed then. And that was in the Russian occupied section, actually. And that's where I continued school then, and we stayed there for about a year or so. There's one story about Hartberg. It was sort of, farmland, and we had apples and, fruit from the trees and so forth. And there was also chicken in the backyard where we stayed. And I found an egg in that yard. And I was very proud. I took that egg in my pocket and brought it home. But then the egg was apparently was there for quite a long time. And the egg just sort of exploded, and it was rotten. Actually, it was just falling apart. So that was another very smelly egg then. That's another little story. And in 1947, we went from Hartberg to Vienna. And that's where we stayed until 1957, when we left for the United States. So that's about, that's way past the World War, but in fact, it relates to it in a way, because my father left in 1955, 2 years before we left, on what they called Operation Paperclip, which was an effort of the United States to get scientists and information about development of weapons and so forth. And my father, since he's been an engineer and working on various projects, so he was engaged in fact, in 1955, he went to the States, and we followed him in 1957. So that's about the story I have. As far as personally, I'm concerned. I was very young at the age of the active war. Didn't really have any effects of it. We were lucky in many respects of not being hit by a bomb or something, and also being out in the country, we had no problem of food since we lived on the farm, and I remember they slaughtered an animal, and so we had food, no problem. So we were not. People in the city had bigger problems. So as far as that goes, there was no real problem for us. I was, at the beginning of the war, I was 5 months old. At the end, I was 6 years old. Mm-hmm. Okay, so towards the end, in fact, in Hao in 1944, when I was 5 years old, I do remember things of the bombs, we being in the basement, and of course I did not comprehend the seriousness of possibly dying and getting hit by a bomb and so forth. To me, it was like, oh, bang, bang again or something, so you look at it different as a child, as you look at it as an adult, and seeing what's really happening. Well, I think certainly as far as having survived, and in general, looking back now, wars are terrible, and after you sort of look a little bit into history about war and what really happened here, it's a terrible situation, and people getting, innocent people getting killed because somebody makes some decisions of, killing each other. Anyway, that's about the lesson about war, being lucky, having survived, and when you look at the situations today in some of those countries where they have war, it's a terrible thing.